Time to get started, just about. I am going to preface and say I'm going to try and go really fast this week. This is the most of anything that we're going to cover. So I maybe got too ambitious with what we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. So just a light material, and there's not much there to talk about. So we're covering a lot of history, and if you could feel free to stop me. I'm going to try and wrap this up in about an hour and 15. That's my goal, but it's going to be a little bit longer than probably some others. So if we get out by that time, we're doing pretty good. So flip over in the back to that terms and names and all those things. We'll just go through this real quick, and those other pages I'll let you guys flip through if you want, but I'm not going to go through all the different emperors and stuff. I think that's just helpful for your information. So when we talk about the Roman Republic, I guess we should start with what is a republic. A republic is not the Republican Party that we're talking about, and that's going to come way, way, way longer. But they are tied to the same kind of concept. So what you have in Rome is a very interesting government and a very unique government that has long shadows that have really shaped our government today. We'll talk a bit about how the Roman Republic comes to be. But the Roman Republic is a republic in general is a government where representatives represent people. And that's going to be what you're going to see with the Roman Republic. But the Roman Republic takes the best parts of many different types of government and tries to apply them as well as possible. And it's very successful until it's not. Maybe some lessons to be learned there. You're going to have then the Roman Empire that follows after the Roman Republic with kind of ushered in by Julius Caesar, who's a name you may not know much about him, but you know that name. Little Caesars, after all. Everybody loves Little Caesars. But Julius Caesar is going to be the first. He's not going to be called an emperor, but he's going to be the first of what becomes an empire. And the institutions of the Republic are going to bend the knee to Caesar. And he's going to be the emperor. And whatever he says goes. And so we're going to have a transition that happens just before the time of Christ, of Rome turning from a republic into an empire. The term pater familias and pater potestas, those are Latin terms. What they mean is pater is father, as you might be able to guess. Familias is father or family. And then potestas is like power, potency. And so this is going to be a really important thing to Roman family life. Roman families are going to be very patriarchal, meaning the father rules the house and has absolute power over his household. He can dictate who you marry. He can dictate who his kids divorce. He can dictate what happens, everything in his household, finances, everything, even life and death. If you have a child and he doesn't like your child, he can kill the child. It's going to be an incredible amount of power given to the heads of families. Patronage. Patron-client relationships are going to be very, very important to understanding Rome and understanding the first century world. A patron is somebody who sponsors somebody else. And that can take all kinds of different forms. It could be somebody sponsors you to run for office. And once you get into office, they scratched your back, and now they expect you to scratch their back. And so there's going to be a debt that comes with being a client to a patron. And that's personal sometimes with individuals, but often that's going to be even city-states and even countries. One thing that we're going to see, especially as we talk about Herod in 2 weeks, is that Herod is going to be a client king to Rome. Rome is going to be his patrician, and so he's going to owe a lot to Rome. Then you get the name Aeneas. Have any of you heard of Aeneas before? Have you ever heard of the book, The Aeneid? Okay. Uh, if you go back and you remember maybe your sophomore year of high school literature class, you may have had to read the Homer's Iliad or the Odyssey. Aeneas is a minor character that makes an appearance in those books. And what Rome does is they say that Aeneas is the father of Rome, essentially. And so they tie their roots all the way back to the Greek mythology. Aeneas' mother was supposed to have been Aphrodite. And so they claim that Rome has these divine origins with Aeneas. Aeneas flees to Italy, and he has some grandsons down the road named Romulus and Remus. You may have heard of those names before. Romulus is the legendary founder of Rome. His brother Remus was there alongside of him. Romulus kills his brother and establishes the city of Rome, named after himself, and becomes the first king of Rome. And that's kind of an interesting thing. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Kings of Rome. There's one thing you need to know about Rome. They don't like kings, even to the point that Julius Caesar and all the emperors really, for all the power that they had, they never called themselves king because that is unacceptable. They are equals. And so king is going to be a loaded term, the word rex in Latin. Then you have Rome, the capital city of the Roman Empire. It's in Italy. Have any of you been to Rome, aside from my brother-in-law? So it's a cool city. I really want to go someday. We need to take a Europe trip. Well, yeah. If I'm not here one week, I'm in Italy. So Carthage is going to be an interesting place. Have any of you heard of Carthage before? Have you ever heard of what's called the Carthaginian solution before? For those of you who may have been in military or those type things. Okay. Carthage is going to be a big enemy for Rome. It's going to be a city that's in North Africa, in what's modern day Tunisia. So kind of it's right on the Mediterranean Ocean. It's west of Egypt. Carthage is going to fight a series of very, very bloody wars with Rome. Rome is going to finally defeat them and gain world power. Those wars are going to be called the Punic Wars. That's because of Carthage being a colony of the Phoenicians with Tyre and those people that we talked about earlier with the conquest of Alexander the Great. And so they get the name Punic from the word Phoenician. And so there's going to be a series of wars that they fight. We'll talk about those very, very briefly, but they're important because that's when Rome transitions from just a small regional power and into a world power. You go down the line some, you get a couple names that might be important. There's a guy by the name of Pompey the Great. And he's an extremely wealthy and extremely powerful Roman. He's a very, very competent general. And he conquers just this huge amount of land and a huge amount of territory, including Judea. And so in 63 BC, he's going to conquer Judah and Jerusalem. He's going to march into Jerusalem and actually walk inside the Holy of Holies to see what's happening. Which is going to be a pretty interesting story we'll talk about next week. After he conquers Judea in 63, there's going to be a Roman presence there forever, basically. Until Rome falls, there's going to be a Roman presence. You got the guy by the name of Julius Caesar, who's really important because he transitions Rome from the Republic into the empire. And he's going to gather just an enormous amount of wealth. I was looking earlier. I think estimates at how wealthy Julius Caesar was in today's money is somewhere like $4 to $5 trillion with a T. Just enormously wealthy and very talented general, very talented politician, good looking, and he's quite the figure. He's going to take over the empire, and he's going to pass his power along to his heir, a guy by the name of Octavian, or Augustus, as you might have heard him called. He's in the Bible. A couple offices that are important we'll talk about. You've probably heard of these before. There's the office called a procurator or a prefect. This is the office that Pilate holds. It's kind of a governor. And so as Rome conquers all these different lands throughout the world, they've got a problem with how are we going to govern these people? And that problem is solved by procurators who govern these different regions, and they report back to somebody called a proconsul. But this is a very important office. If you want to gain standing in Roman society, this is one of the steps that you have to step on to advance. And so it's going to be a very competitive position and a very difficult position to get. And once you have this position, there's a lot of pressure to advance or at least hold on to it, which you're going to see with some of the decisions Pilate makes. As you can maybe guess, a procurator procures. One of their jobs is to get taxes. And so there's some big responsibilities there. It's easy to get taxes when people are peaceful, right? Maybe that's some of Pilate's motivation. Then you're going to have an office called a publican, which you may have heard. I think King James uses the term, publican. Tax collectors, sinners and publicans. Tax collectors are publicans. And so this is going to be a position that's often delegated towards, or given to people who are local in the community, but to collect taxes on behalf of Rome. And you can imagine they're hated. And so Matthew is a tax collector. Zacchaeus is a tax collector. Not likable guys by the general public. And finally, our last term that we'll talk about just briefly is the term Pax Romana. Pax is the Latin word peace. Romana is the word Rome. And so this is the Roman peace. And, we're going to talk about a lot of really some atrocious things that are going to happen. This is instituted pretty much after the time period we're going to talk about today. But as we go on in our class, we're going to talk about a lot of really some atrocious things that happen. But in general, when Rome is in control, things are pretty good. Things are pretty stable. Maybe that's a better term. You can trade as you want to trade. You can travel a lot more easily. People have the same kind of currency. Piracy's down, and that's a big deal, actually. And things are generally pretty peaceful. And so the Pax Romana is going to be a very important thing. Okay. Any questions about that before we get it? I know I went through it real quick this time. Any questions, though? Okay. I also gave you a list of Roman emperors. I'm not going to go over that, but this is going to be the Roman emperors from the time period that we're going to cover. We're going to stop with Hadrian. I meant to bring it. I didn't bring it today, though. I forgot. I have a Roman coin, a real gold coin from Emperor Hadrian's rule. And I was going to pass it around, but I forgot. I'll bring it next week. But it's really cool. You can see his face on the coin. And then there's a list of the Roman procurators of Judea. And so there's a couple of them that's got stars by their names, and those are the ones that appear in the Bible. So Pontius Pilate, Felix, Festus, those are the guys that appear in the Bible. Okay. I know I was flying through that. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Well, so what we're going to do this week, here's my game plan. I'm going to talk about Rome this week because Rome's going to be a big player. And I figured as I was making up my syllabus sheet, I guess, with what we're going to talk about each week, I somehow overlooked Rome. So we're going to try and shuffle things around a little bit, but we're going to talk about Rome. Do many of you know the story of Rome in general? Have you taken history classes a long time ago, or maybe not so long ago, or read any books or watched any TV shows about Rome? Great. So we're in for a good one. So We're going to cover a lot of history, and this is going to be very, very, very bare bones. There's so much that I'm going to be leaving out, but this is really fascinating stuff, and I think this stuff is just super, super interesting. As you study Rome, it makes you kind of scared for the world because you identify what's happening at Rome is exactly what's happening today with this and that. And so studying Rome will make you a little bit scared. But Rome's going to be so, so important. If Rome didn't exist, the whole world of the first century is not going to be even close to the same. The language people are going to speak is not going to be the same. What language does what language do Romans speak? Not Italian. Italian's going to come by much, much, much later. Actually, like what, the past 100 years was Italian kind of formalized or something? Yeah. Latin, yeah. They're going to speak Latin. Latin's a really important language because what languages spring from Latin? Virtually every European language. So Spanish is any Romance languages, if you've ever heard that. That term Romance is Rome. Spanish, French, Portuguese, Romanian, large parts of English, although English is technically Germanic, but it's going to have a huge impact. And so tons of the words you say would not exist if Latin didn't exist, if Rome didn't exist. Your culture is not going to exist. Western culture is heavily shaped by Rome. Your government wouldn't exist. The United States wouldn't exist if it weren't for Rome. When you got the founding fathers and they're looking for, how are we going to build this new country? What do they read? They read Roman authors and they read about the Roman institutions and the Roman Republic. And so like when we talk about our three branches of government, right? What are they? Here's your civics question for the day. Judiciary, executive, legislative. Ooh, that was a C. But wait, Rome has three branches of government that check each other in different. They're going to be different branches, but they're going to check each other. Those ideas come straight from the Roman Republic, and so Rome's going to have a huge shape on the United States. And it's going to have a huge shape on the world of the Bible. So let's talk about Rome just a little bit. What makes Rome so unique? Roman culture and Roman society is very, very strange, especially when you consider the rest of the world. They're just hyper virtuous. And what I mean by virtue is not necessarily what you're thinking by virtue. What do you think of as a virtue? You think of like kindness and strength and those kind of things. The word virtue, the word vir, is the Latin word man. And so, or wir, I guess, because they don't have the V, they had to do a W. And so when you talk about virtues, these are like the things that embody manliness to a Roman, the things that you need to be. These are the qualities that if you want to be a good person, you have to do these things. And there's lists of virtues that Romans embody, but we won't cover all of them. But here's a couple that are important. Civic duty. Romans had a extraordinary responsibility, pressure put on them to be good citizens. And there's this ideal of what a perfect Roman should be. And that ideal is you should be a farmer, and you should be a citizen, and you should be a soldier. And so there's some interesting things that go there. Well, why a farmer? Why is a farmer one of the three chief virtues of what a perfect citizen should be? Yeah, they're the only trade that produces things, essentially. Rome had this view of all other trades being demeaning because essentially you're selling yourself to do something else. Even if you're working as a shop owner, you're selling your labor for somebody else's money. And so it's a sense of slavery. But the farmer alone is the one who works for himself and makes something for others. And so that's kind of a strange thought that they had. But farmers were the pinnacle of honorable professions. And so even like really, really wealthy Roman senators and even like Pompey, who's going to be this great conqueror, you ask, what's your job? And he says, oh, I'm just a farmer. He's never touched the soil in a day of his life, but he's just a farmer. And so that's the ideal. A citizen. Well, what is a citizen? Somebody who votes and participates in public life. A soldier. In the Roman military, early on at least, only citizens could be soldiers. And so they had a volunteer army of people that fight for their homeland. And so all of this is kind of the quintessential idea of what a good Roman soldier should be, or what a good Roman person should be, is kind of exemplified in a guy by the name of, there's a lot of great names today, so prepare yourselves. Lucius Quinticus Cincinnatus, who is this farmer. He served as a senator for a long time. He held a bunch of high offices, but then he gave those things up to farm. And so he farmed on this tiny little farm and they make very clear it's 7 acres, a 7-acre farm, supporting himself and his family. And they're dirt poor, and there comes a crisis in Rome, and they don't know who to turn to. So they turn to Cincinnatus and say, listen, we want you to become our dictator for a while. And dictator kind of has some negative connotations for us, obviously. But what it meant to them is, we're going to give you total control of the whole government for 60 days, or 6 months, I think. 6 months. And then at the end of that, your term's up. But we need you to make the decisions to resolve this conflict. So he reluctantly leaves his farm and becomes dictator of Rome, solves the problem in 21 days, and then gives up power. And goes back to his farm and his relative poverty. And that's, to Rome, that's the ideal of what you should be. You should take power reluctantly and serve your country and serve your people. And then when it's all done, go back to your humble life. And somebody that you might know took a lot of inspiration from Cincinnatus. Who might that be? His name starts with a G. George Washington. George Washington served as president. He could have made himself king, but he didn't. And when the time came, he gave up his power, returned to his farm, and lived out the rest of his life. And so civic duty is going to be really, really important to Romans. They're going to have a strong sense of loyalty to their people and to their nation, to their city. They're going to be extremely disciplined and extremely courageous. The Roman army is going to be a fighting force like no other. They're going to be crazy in people's eyes because of the dedication and just the ferocity with which they fight. There's a story from early on in Roman history of a guy by the name of Gaius Musius Scaevola, and his last name Scaevola means left hand, and the reason he's called the lefty is because he was sent on an assassination mission. He was sent to go assassinate. He's like a 20-something-year-old kid, and he was sent to go assassinate the king of this rival group. And he goes there and he assassinates, and then he finds out he killed the wrong guy, and he didn't kill the king. And he's taken captive, and they are torturing him, and he won't give up anything. And he says to the king, he says, watch so that you may know how cheap the body is to men who have their eye on great glory. And so he makes a statement. He says, I may not be able to kill you, but if I don't, there's all kinds of people around me that are volunteering to kill you too. And you're going to have to fend off assassins the rest of your life as long as you put this up. And so he says, watch this. And he sticks his right hand in a fire and his hand burns off. and he mutilates himself. And the king is so freaked out by it. He's so shocked. He says, okay, we're going to let you go and we're going to surrender to Rome. And so, he says, listen, I don't care. It's just a hand. And there are thousands more like me that are willing to do this and more. That kind of discipline is just incomprehensible. And you're going to see time and time again that Romans are just kind of freaks. They're so devoted to their cause, and they're so devoted to their rulers and to their empire that they're willing to do anything. They're going to be very religious, very pious. They will worship all kinds of different gods, and they virtually none of them, I don't imagine, would be worshiping the true God. But they're going to be very, very religious. And part of day-to-day life is giving to the gods, lowercase g, the honor and the service that is due to them. And so they're going to be very pious. And what that's going to do is create a very strong cultural cohesion. And they're going to be very, very united on that front as far as culture goes. So, sorry, I just got off track. There's going to be a big, big emphasis on relationships in Roman society. The father of the family is going to rule the household, sometimes with an iron fist. If you are the father of the family, the patriarch, this is not just necessarily individual families, this is often extended families too. You have a lot of responsibility. You oversee everything. Who your children are going to marry, that's your decision. You're going to decide what financial decisions. And there's reports of lots of families that are very, very wealthy, and one guy makes some bad decisions and they bankrupt the whole family. And that's going to be an issue. Actually, that's going to be an issue that Julius Caesar is going to face. His father kind of bankrupted the family. And when he starts his campaign, he's poor because his father wasn't a great manager of the household. And you're going to have, even life and death. If you have a child that you don't want, you can just tell your wife, expose the child, and put him on a hill, let him die, and there's nothing they can do. If they disobey you, they die. So just crazy amounts of power. But families are going to be very important. You're going to be very, very loyal to your family. And so when we talk about like Julius Caesar, here's an interesting thing. The word Julius, that's his family name. We call him Julius, but his from the family Julii. And so that's going to be a very powerful family in Roman history. And taking that name is what's going to be very important for his successors. Slavery is going to be a very, very big part of Roman life. Roman slavery is not like American slavery. It's not racial. You can be. I'm not sure I understand. They're often enslaving their own fellow citizens, their own Romans, Italians. They're slaving people that they conquer from Europe and from Africa and from all over the world. It's not racial, but it is very, very powerful. They had a lot of control over their slaves. They owned them. Often their slaves would be very educated. Often they'd have very good relationships with their masters, but they are still slaves. There was a point in time where there was a vote that came out in the Roman Senate to make all the slaves wear certain colored clothes or something like that, so that you can quickly identify who's a slave and who's not a slave. And they decided to not pass that bill. You know why? Because they were scared that the slaves would see how many of them there were. At the time, around 180, so like 180, Rome had a population of about 900,000 people living in the city, and it's estimated that about 350,000 of those were slaves. And so what do slave masters always fear? They fear their slaves. And so they decided against that. But slavery was not necessarily for life. You could very easily earn your freedom and earn your citizenship and those type of things. So when we talk about slavery, I know we often go to American slavery just because that's the world we live in and the culture, and we've studied that probably more than anything else. But there's some similarities, but there are more differences than similarities. Patronage. We talked about that just a little bit. There's a famous quote by a guy by the name of Publius Syrus. He said, "To accept kindness is to sell your freedom." And Rome takes that to heart. There's all kinds of people who are really, really rich at Rome, and they're willing to sponsor you to do whatever you want to do. But as soon as you take that loan, there are strings attached for the rest of your life, just about. And so clients were bound by honor to serve their patrician. Slaves who became freed by their masters, even they earned their freedom, but even they were kind of in this forever patron-client relationship, where even after they were free and no longer slaves, they still owed their former masters, their patrons, 1 week's labor every year for the rest of their life. And if they didn't, it was legal for the former master to go re-enslave them because they didn't show them the proper respect. And so patron-client relationships are going to be really, really big. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about Herod and his business. Any thoughts on that before we move on to the next slide? I know that's a lot. Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of like early mob.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a guy who's going to be named Crassus. He's going to be one of the guys that really helped Caesar rise to power. And he became extremely wealthy, worth like $1 trillion in today's money, because he owned all the fire departments. And so you don't want your house to burn down. Well, you better pay him a little bit of money. And so that's the kind of stuff that's going on. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, there's definitely some blackmail going on here. Any other thoughts? Okay, let's talk briefly about their government, and then we'll talk about kind of the course of events. This is a slave collar that was found from Rome. It says, "I have run away. Catch me. If you take me back to my master Zoninus, you will be rewarded." So slavery is not so great. When we talk about Roman government's going to be probably the most unique aspect of Rome. They're governed so differently than virtually every other society up until basically modern day. You got a guy by the name of Polybius, who's a really, really important kind of writer from the Roman period. And he has this theory of how world governments develop. And I think there's a lot of truth to this. Try and find where we are on this circle. And he calls it his cycle of anacyclosis. It's this repeating cycle over and over, repeats and repeats and repeats. So you begin with anarchy or mob rule. People who don't care about the law, just loose associations of people. But inevitably you start having fighting among peoples, right? And so what happens is you have a king who arises. You have a strong man who appears, and he unites the people and gives them direction. But over time, that kingship, which is good, begins to become corrupt. And as they become corrupt, the kings abuse their people, and they become tyrants. And so no one wants a tyrant. And so as the society has developed, there's going to be other people who have some power behind them. And they're going to stand up against the tyrant and overthrow the tyrant. Those people are going to be the aristocrats, the wealthy, powerful people of a society. And they're going to not stand for the tyranny. But over time, the aristocracy is going to become corrupt and turn into an oligarchy where only a small number of people rule the whole government. And it's not fair to the rest of the people who have no say in what's going on. And so the people don't like that. So they stand up to the oligarchy And then you have a what? Democracy, where the people now have the power. But then eventually that doesn't pan out so well, and the people become corrupt, and you're right back down to square one of anarchy and mob rule. There's a lot of truth to that. You think, like, where are we in this cycle? I think somewhere probably about right there. So, so what Rome does is they recognize this. They hate kings, and we'll talk about that in a second. They have an aristocracy, but the people don't want to be ruled by these elites. But mob rule is not good either. So what do? They take the best parts of the kingship, they take the best parts of a democracy, they take the best parts of an aristocracy, and they make a new kind of government that they call a republic. And so what you're going to see in Rome is they've got a three-tiered political system. They have a Senate that makes and decides laws. The people who are in the Senate are very wealthy, rich, old families, like an aristocracy, people that have experience and a lot of buy-in into the society. But they also have what they call a consul, which is kind of like a president. And so they have an executive branch that takes, because sometimes you just need a single person to make decisions, right? If you leave every decision up to everybody, you're never going to get anywhere. And so they have consuls, and they have two of them at a time. They serve 1-year terms, and they're elected positions. And so you have like the best of the king world comes into that. And then you also have what's called the assembly, where the common people, your average citizen, no matter how poor you are, you have a vote. And, it may not always quite be fair towards the poor, but there is an aspect of democracy. You have this office that comes to be called the tribune of the plebs. A pleb is just a regular person in Latin. And they're able to veto laws that the aristocratic Senate passes. And so you have the system of checks and balances that happens in Roman society that lets them be incredibly successful and for people to be very happy with their government. Does that sound familiar? Like, can you see how founding fathers of America drew so much from this? They drew a lot from it. And so Roman government is a really interesting fact. Lots of aspects of it. We won't get into much more than that. Okay. Any questions on that? I'm really shooting for the 15 mark, but we may see. I got a lot left. So let's talk about the history of Rome in general. And I know this is a lot. And if you got questions after, you can come ask me and all that, and I'll be happy to geek out with you a little bit. So Rome was founded around 753 BC. And when I say Rome, I don't mean like a huge empire. I mean the city of Rome. In this time period, you have lots of city-states where a single city will have a king. Think about that like in Greece. You got like Athens and Sparta, and they're all city-states with their own kings. There's a king of Athens and a king of Sparta and those type things. Rome is similar. There's a king of Rome. Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus, as legend goes. Whether there was actually a Romulus or a Remus, maybe, probably, I don't know. But they claim that they have roots from Aeneas, from the Greek Iliad. They come up, and he has some grandchildren named Romulus and Remus, and they found this city and all that. Romulus and Remus, what's the interesting, legendary thing about Romulus and Remus? Raised by wolves. I'll skip down to it real quick, but that's a picture of an old mosaic of Romulus and Remus. What are they doing? You can kind of see them down here. Yeah, they're nursing off the wolf, which Claire has informed me she will not allow. So makes for strong babies. So that's how Rome was supposedly founded. And after Romulus founds the city, he becomes the first king. And so they say that there's a series of 7 kings that rule over Rome. And term for king is rex. But as that cycle says, what happens to kings? They become tyrants, and they abuse their people. And that's exactly what happened. You have a king who has a son that's named Sextus Tarquinius. And there was this competition among him and some of his buddies about who here has the most virtuous wife, who's got the best wife. And they go and they look and they kind of spy in on their wives while they're off gone. And some of their wives are just laying around the house doing nothing and drinking. And but there's one guy by the name of, I'll spare you the name. His last name's Colentinus. He has a wife named Lucretia who's very virtuous. She's a great wife. She's busy at work. She's making thread for her family so that they can wear clothes and all that kind of stuff. And so what the king's son, the prince, I guess, what he decides, Lucretia's pretty good looking. And so he rapes his friend's wife. And she is so, I won't get into the whole story, but she ends up eventually, to spare her husband the dishonor of having an unfaithful wife, she kills herself. And it outrages her husband and all of his friends. And so a guy by the name of Brutus rises up and kills and casts out the kings and swears that there will never be another king in Rome. Do you know the name Brutus anywhere? Have you ever heard that name? Do it? Popeye. Okay.
Et tu, Brutus.
Yeah, et tu, Brutus. This guy's great-great-great-great-great-grandson is going to also be named Brutus, and he's going to kill Julius Caesar because Julius Caesar makes himself a king. And so it's going to be kind of interesting. So the kings are no more. The republic has been established at this point. They're sick of kings. They don't want to ever have another king in Rome. And it's such to the point that even Julius Caesar will not say he's a king. He takes the term emperor. Well, he doesn't, but eventual emperors will take the term emperor, but they will not take the term king because Rome has no taste for kings after this event. So you skip down quite a bit. The Roman Empire is very successful. They conquer all of Italy, basically, and they expand from just a tiny little city-state to kind of a regional power. And then they enter into this war with Carthage, which is in Africa, remember? And this war is going to be basically what World War II was for America. Before the World Wars, America was a pretty local regional power, right? We didn't intervene anywhere else in the world. Basically, we had the, what's that? There's the something doctrine. I don't remember. Monroe Doctrine? No, that's not it. I don't know. Is it Monroe Doctrine? Justin, you would know. Where America doesn't really go over.
Yes, it is.
Okay, the Monroe Doctrine. There it is.
One of the things that George Washington and founding fathers says don't get involved with other countries. Neither borrow nor lend to be.
Yeah, there's this strong hesitancy to get involved overseas because they'll drag you into stuff. And there's kind of the similar thing happening here at Rome. Rome was a regional power, but after this war, they're going to be a world power, which is the same thing that happened with the United States. We were a regional power. We got involved in the world wars, and we come out stronger than we were before. And so that's going to be what happens to Rome here. There's going to be a series of 3 wars that take place between Rome and Carthage. And they're going to be just absolutely horrendous, horrific wars. They're going to be terrifying. Rome is going to fight against Carthage. Rome is a land power. They have they've got a great land military. They do not have a navy. Whereas Carthage has an incredible navy. And a pretty good land power. It's fascinating that throughout these wars, Rome is going to get their tail kicked just nonstop, and yet because they're so determined, they're going to eventually overcome. It's like the saying, "How do sheep kill a lion? They drown him with blood." That's going to be what happens here. you know, there's going to be the largest ship battle of all time. And like, I'm talking up until today, that's going to happen. It's called the Battle of Cape Economus. There's 680 warships. Rome eventually gets their navy figured out, their situation. There's going to be 290,000 soldiers. And there's going to be this just massive battle. After the battle, there's going to be this massive storm that sweeps through the Mediterranean Sea, and over 100,000 men are going to die in one night. They're going to drown in one day. Can you even imagine 100,000? Here, you know how many people are in this picture? 104,000 people. That's like every one of those people dying except for one of those sections. Yeah, that's just crazy. And that's not both sides. That's Rome. Rome's going to have 104,000 people die. That's just mind-boggling to me. They're going to have a battle. There's going to be a Carthaginian general by the name of Hannibal, Hannibal Barca, who's going to be just this incredible military tactician, probably the second best in the world next to Alexander the Great. He's going to march elephants over the Swiss Alps and into Italy. And he's going to be in Italy for like 2 decades or something, living next to Rome, and Rome can't kill him. He's in the homeland. He threatens siege against Rome, but Rome can't kill him. They can't beat him. There's going to be a battle called the Battle of Lake Trasimene, where Rome sends out this army of 25,000 people, including one of their consuls, who's, like their president. They've got 2 of them at a time, but one of their consuls is going to be leading this army. And there's going to be this cliff on this side and a lake over here. And Hannibal is going to hide his troops on the other side of this lake, this hill. And when Rome passes by, they're going to run down the hill, push Rome into the lake, and 25,000 Romans, including their consul, their president, are going to die. Can you imagine if the president died in a military battle today? Like, that's so bizarre to even think about. There's going to be a battle called the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal is going to have, there's going to be this massive army of Romans, 53,000 people. So like half that stadium. And Hannibal is going to manage to circle them and with his very small army, and then crush them, move in and in until the Romans are literally stepping and crushing each other to death. And 53,000 Romans are going to be killed. Like, it's just mind-boggling numbers. But Rome is so determined, and they're so stubborn, they don't give up, and they keep raising more and more men. They're eventually going to beat Carthage. And then you have what's called the Carthaginian solution, which is wipe them out entirely. And so what Rome is going to eventually do to Carthage is they're going to completely obliterate them. They're going to level their city. They're going to salt the earth, literally, and Carthage will be no more. Just total, utter destruction. And so it's just a horrible series of wars. But at the end, Rome rises up, and it's stronger than ever before. They've taken out their biggest enemy. They've now got a taste for expansion, and they are hungry for more. And so Rome is going to expand and expand. There's going to be a series of strong men, and that's the technical term, individuals who have just enormous power under their own control. This is not like a government army. This is like a private army. And these people are going to just, destroy the Roman institutions is what they're going to do. They're going to become corrupt. They're going to be extremely wealthy, have trillions of American dollars worth of money behind them, and they're going to be very self-interested, which are not good recipes. You're going to have people like Pompey the Great, who's going to he wants to be an Alexander the Great. And he loves the term. He calls himself the Great because he wants to be like Alexander. And he throws these wild parties, and he has the statue of Alexander. And he's like a 50-year-old man. He's like fat. And he says, tell me how good looking I am. And people are like, oh, you look just like Alexander. And no, he doesn't. But he wants to be Alexander. and he wants people to recognize him and honor him. And all of this is going to eventually culminate in Julius Caesar. And he's going to be a strong man that breaks the system. He's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And after him, the Republic is going to exist, but it's not going to have any real power. And he's going to be the true emperor of Rome, essentially. He's going to be elected to a position called dictator in perpetuity, dictator forever. And so the dictatorship office was something that was supposed to be reserved for a very brief, limited period of time, but he's going to have that office forever. And so will his heir. Any thoughts on that? Because that's a whole lot of history that I just dumped on you. And I left out so many cool things, so many cool stories. During the Punic Wars, there's a guy by the name of, what was his name? It's going to drive me crazy now. No, not Scipio. Scipio's pretty cool, though. It's going to drive me crazy. There's a guy who was very famous, and he gave all these speeches in the Forum. And actually, that's what that picture is behind us, of him giving a speech to the senators in the Forum. And he ends every speech with, "And Carthage must burn." And so, like, for years. And so, like some crazy characters that you get there. So what would it be like to be conquered by Rome? We're not going to get into all the emperors. We'll talk about them a little bit more because they'll play into what we talk about a little bit more, where we are in the history of Judea specifically. But what about all these different conquered people? How does a government that's run by people in a time without cell phones manage a country that spans continents? Bureaucracy. So you delegate and you divide up lands. You can't have the people in Rome making every decision for the people over in Africa, or making the decisions for everybody over in Israel territory, in Syria. You have to delegate. And so Rome develops this really extensive bureaucracy system to govern all the lands that they conquer. And so they set up, at the top of the chain, they set up what's called a proconsul. Remember, a consul is like the president of Rome. There's two of them. But they set up lots and lots and lots of proconsuls to oversee big areas that report to the consuls. And then under them are what's called prefects or procurators. And you have quite a few of these that are mentioned in the Bible, right? This is the office that Pilate's going to have. Pilate's going to be a prefect of Rome. He's going to oversee the land of Judea. And he's going to govern it and make decisions for it. And importantly, what do procurators do? They procure. And so he's going to be charged with getting money. Does Rome really care about what's happening in the far off back country of nowhere town? No, as long as they get their money, right? And so money is going to be the important thing. They want that to keep trickling up because the rich want to get richer here. And so you're going to have quite a few procurators that appear. Other than Pilate, who else are procurators in the Bible, or prefects? Pilate, Felix, Festus. Yeah, those are going to be the three that are mentioned by name in the New Testament. Then you're going to have publicans, or publicani, which is the plural form. They're going to be the tax collectors. And so Rome's going to go and they're going to hire individuals within the local communities to gather the taxes for themselves. And the publicans like to do what? Skim a little extra, right? And so they often make themselves very rich because they're taking more than they should. and they're very unpopular for that reason, but also because Rome's an occupying force, and people don't like to be ruled by Rome, and they want to be ruled by themselves and their own governments, and so they're going to be deeply, deeply unpopular people, and you can tell that because when you have tax collectors mentioned in the Bible, who are they with? The tax collectors and the sinners. That's a glowing recommendation for the profession, right? Hope nobody works for the IRS here. I'm joking. But taxation is going to be really big. Rome wants their money. They want their taxes. There's going to be all kinds of different taxes that they put on people. There's going to be a poll tax. They're going to have to register constantly. They're going to have to give a denarius a person, which isn't that much. It's like a day's wage, I guess is what you call it. But it's not fun, especially if you're poor farmer living off of, you have pennies to your name. That's still a lot of money because you may not have a lot of money. You may have some goods. There's going to be a land tax. 10% of everything you grow is going to be given to the Roman government. Or you can, I guess, trade it out for cash. But 10% is a lot if you think about it. If you think about you're somebody that's farming for a living and you're farming to live, this is, you're making barely enough for your family. And Rome says, give me 10%. That's a sizable percentage. And there's many, many other taxes. There'd be like city taxes and all kinds of other taxes, but those are the universal taxes. When you think about the taxes the Jews had to pay too, they had to pay temple tax. They had to tithe 10%. So now you're looking at like 30% of your income just about. There are lots of other taxes that Jews had to pay. It's estimated that Jews paid about 60% of their income in taxes during the time of Jesus. That's a lot. And there's no moving to Tennessee. So other things that Rome revoked the right of the people to make their own coins. You have to use Roman money. Why is that a problem? You could. Why is that a problem for the Jews, though, in particular? Who's on the coin? An interesting thing about Jewish money is that they don't typically, there's going to be some exceptions, but they don't put faces on them because they don't, it's a religious, you're given honor to a person type thing. And the fact that you're going to be given coins that got Caesar's face, who claims himself to be a god, that's going to be an issue. And so that's going to be an issue. Religious liberty is going to be an interesting thing that's going to happen. So by and large, Rome doesn't care. Rome just wants you to shut up and pay your taxes. Just be good, quiet little people, and just give them your money. And so there's going to be more religious liberty than we probably think that there would be. They don't care that the Jews worship God. They don't care that the Canaanites worship Baal. Whatever. Just give us your taxes. However, you're going to have the Roman procurator who's going to be in charge over the land. And so certain things that religious bodies would do, they no longer had the authority to do. What might an example of that be? Yeah. In the Bible, you have the Sanhedrin, right? The Council of Elders that were to rule the people and at times execute death sentences for things. They don't have that right anymore. Now that right is Pilate's. And so when the Sanhedrin wants to kill Jesus, what can they not do? Kill Jesus. So what do? They bounce them back and forth between Pilate and Herod. They can't give the order to have him killed. Pilate doesn't care and says, just do with them what you want to do. But it's Pilate's decision to make. And so that's going to be a problem. But, procurators are going to appoint the high priests too, which is going to be an issue. You got Caiaphas and Annas in the New Testament. They're going to be people that were appointed by the high priest or by the procurators, which we've already looked at. There's a lot of funny business going on with that high priesthood. So that's going to be a challenge, but by and large, Rome doesn't care. They just want you to pay your taxes. Then you also have the Pax Romana. I'm doing good. Well, we're at 7 o'clock and I'm almost done. You have the Pax Romana, which is this piece of Rome, which is going to be really instituted under Caesar Augustus, the one who follows after Julius Caesar. But it's going to make Rome's going to be a very peaceful place to live by and large. There's of course going to be exceptions. But people have the same kind of money. Think about trying to do business with somebody if you couldn't find the same kind of coins. It'd be impossible. My coin might be 100% gold, and you give me a coin that's like 75% gold. They're not worth the same thing. And so it's going to make business really easy, and businesses are going to thrive. You're going to have roads. Roman roads are incredible. Like, I don't know if you. They still exist today, and they're still used today. Rome's going to build all kinds of roads, and all roads lead to Rome. And there's going to be just great infrastructure, aqueducts, bringing water to people out in the boonies so that you can have much more plentiful water. That's going to be a really big quality of life improvement for a lot of people. There's going to be an aqueduct that's built, and it's going to be kind of scandalous because they're going to steal money from the temple treasury, but there's going to be an aqueduct built that goes into Jerusalem, which is really good because where's Jerusalem? In the middle of the desert. And so there's going to be a lot of good that comes from it, though, from some of these construction programs that Rome builds. Piracy is going to be way, way down. We don't think about pirates all that much, and we may think of pirates in the Caribbean when we think about pirates, but people stealing your possessions is enormously challenging. Trying to trade when you're on foot and there's robbers everywhere, that's really hard. And so this is just going to generally be a very good time for life. As far as communication, everybody's going to be speaking Greek or Latin. Throughout most of the Roman Empire, actually, most people are going to speak Greek instead of Latin, which is kind of ironic. The influence of Alexander the Great. But people are going to speak the same language. They're going to have the same money. They're going to have roads. There's going to be safety and security. There's going to be common laws. This is going to be a really good time for, say, this new movement to spread that's wanting to go to the ends of the earth, right? And so this is going to be a very big, impactful reason, I think, for what's Galatians say? For the fullness of time, he sent his son. This is going to be one of the big reasons why, I think. So a lot of what we talked about is not going to be, it's not in the Bible. Virtually none of this is what we talked about is directly in your Bible, but it shapes the world that your Bible's happening in. And so this is all really important things. And we could talk so much. There's so many cool stories and so much that happened that's just fascinating. But, Rome is so important. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Hasmoneans and the people that followed after the Maccabees. I know we kind of go back, so you're going to have to review your notes. We're going to be talking about the Hasmonean Empire, which is going to end when Pompey comes rolling in. And then Rome's going to be in charge from there on out.